I just want to say one thing. I say, yo, Christian brothers and sisters who are watching this, don't be a slacker.
Facts.
Don't be slacking, because you ain't representing when you slacking, and people are going to use that against you. Oh, I know that person.
Yeah.
They say they're Christian, they go to church, but then they don't do the work. They be coming in late, and they be trying to skip work for whatever reason.
I don't want to be that guy, but isn't
Don't
it like
do
a
that.
sin to be lazy?
Yeah, it is. You know, you don't work, you don't eat. That's what the Bible says.
So,
yo, if you call yourself a Christian and you slacking, you need to get it right, because that's not what God has called us to be. And and that's not a good example for those who are watching, because they will, those who are watching will use that against you, and they will classify all Christians in that category.
Exactly. That's what the adversaries always do. Just want to classify everybody in that one bad category. One bad apple ruins every other bunch.
Yep.
So
what's up, fam? Welcome to another edition of God Dreamers, where it is our desire to inspire you to find and activate your God-given purpose through sharing stories, testimonies, and having discussions on today's trending topics. So hi, I'm your host, Todd.
And I'm Jairus.
All right, Jairus. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this episode since you are the resident expert. How about that?
I guess I could be an expert. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about this faith in sports. So I've just seen a kind of like a shift in sports and the culture around mainstream media when it comes to giving God praise, when it comes to the interviews, interviews and just anything that goes around with people talking about sports in general when it comes to these athletes or musicians, anything out there. But primarily we're just going to be focusing on sports today and just kind of debate, have a great little conversation on, do you think is a shift happening? I know we grew up in two different generations. You know, more like you're a baby boomer, right? So
yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So you definitely see more in the sports world of TV and things like that. And the biggest question I was just going to ask you is like, do you think there's a shift going on right now? Because I know you've probably seen sports for a long time. Like, do you think it's a rampant uptick in people just putting God in the interviews and talking about God more profoundly now?
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. I think, in the past, from the sports of years ago when they used to interview athletes, I mean, there would be a few times they'll say, hey, I thank God and so forth. But I think today it seems like people are a little bit more in depth in sharing their faith. They're saying they thank God, but then they kind of dig a little bit deeper. So yeah, I would say in the last few years, I've seen more athletes sharing their faith in a greater detail and greater depth than what I've seen in the past.
That's what I'm thinking too, because I was thinking the same thing. And like I was saying earlier, you probably seen more TV than me just over the course of the years, but just over the course maybe 5 years, I've just seen like just the more people just giving thanks to God, even, wins and losses. But like I said, like in interviews, press game conferences, award speeches, it just seems a little bit more rampant. Do you think there's anything behind it? Do you think is it a generational thing? Basically, like, why now? Why do you think you see more people bringing it up now? You think there's a reason behind it?
Yeah. That's a good question. I would imagine, I think there's a resurgence of younger people wanting to know and learn about God in a deeper way. A little bit different from our generation. I think my generation grew up in church. We did the traditional church, right? Whether it was Baptist, Episcopal, I should say, Catholic. We kind of did the tradition of church. And I think this younger generation has a greater desire than going beyond tradition. They want to really know the deeper meanings of Christianity. They want to know what they call it, deconstruction. And so I feel like there's a resurgence of younger people wanting to go deeper and finding faith in God and exciting. They are excited about that journey to the point where they're willing to share it openly, which I think is awesome. Openly in the sphere of sports in other areas. So, and when I'm watching athletes like Sydney McLaughlin, Lavron,
Hmm.
every time they interview her, man, she's always interjecting, Christ. She's always interjecting that He is her strength, and helps her deal with depression and so forth. So it's great to be able to hear that.
Yeah.
Sometimes the media may not like it that much,
Hmm.
but it's great that they're not just saying, "Well, I thank God," and then they call it a day.
Yeah.
And there's younger people, like she's young. I think she's in her 20s, mid-20s. And then there's several other athletes that are out there, in football. I'm trying to think of all the football athletes that I've seen. I think Russell, what's his
Wilson,
last name? Um,
Russell Wilson.
yeah, Russell Wilson,
Hmm.
Kevin Durant. Who else?
I know.
Oh, Steph
What's his
Curry
name?
too. Yeah.
Yeah, Seth Curry. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. That's actually also what I was about to say. But I was about to say his brother for some reason. But yeah, Seth Curry. And I know a few just from football. Bijan Robinson. If you,
Bijan, yeah.
yeah, he's like, and I give. And I'm actually shocked because every interview I've seen him do it, like the first thing he say, first things first, I want to give all thanks to God. Literally before he says anything about football, that's the first thing he says. And then I follow him on Instagram and everything as well. And every Sunday he does like a Bible recap or just like a little prayer type of post. So I think that's pretty cool because he's like one of arguably like the best running back in the league right now. So it's cool because he has a lot of spotlight on him and
Mhm.
he's always giving thanks to God. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that's really the biggest things that I've noticed that I was like, hey, let's talk about this because, like I said earlier, it's like I've just seen a lot more people bring it up. And I could just, talk about a few more people. I know maybe, um, what's his name? Tim Tebow. Like, do you remember him from Florida, the quarterback? Like, he could have been, I feel like he could be arguably the first person that was really profoundly just Christ driven. It's like in college and things like that because, I didn't see a lot of people before then in that case. I think he was maybe like the most mainstream athlete that was doing that. And I could take into account that maybe it's a little thing of social media as well. I think that's another thing that's probably giving people more awareness. And like you said, like the new generation is more bold about it as well. But I think this generation is definitely more bold about it and want to seek more maybe. And especially just like I said, it's just pretty cool that you can see like a big uptick in that. But just wanted to like bring in one scripture with that. It was like Matthew 5, verse 14
Hey,
through
but let me say
16.
one
Yeah.
thing before you jump onto that real quickly. The other thing too is I'm not discounting the athletes that came up in my generation or before. They didn't have social media like we have today.
But
So
yeah, definitely.
so they didn't have, even though they may have been devout Christians and practicing their faith, they didn't have the platform or the resources basically to share that more. So I just wanted to say that. But go ahead, jump into
Okay.
the scripture.
That's a good point. That actually flows into my next segment where I was going to speak next. But Matthew 5, verse 14 through 16 says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So I think that was great. Just reflecting what we're talking about because everybody, like we're saying, has this light on them. Like I said, with Bijan Robinson being one of the best running backs in the league, everybody's looking at him, man. The fact that he's, glorifying God and giving him basically all affirmation of that, I think is a great thing with that. So moving on, like what I was saying, the influence factor. There's actually like a statistic that's saying 64% of Americans say pro athletes have more influence in society than faith leaders. I thought that was pretty interesting.
60, how much?
64%.
Have more influence?
Yes. And it's
Yeah,
from
what?
Barna.
I can believe that because they're reaching the masses,
Hmm.
and so that environment. I mean, sports is kind of a experience that's open to the masses,
Exactly.
right? So you got the atheists, you got the agnostics, you got the Christians, you got the Buddhists, you got everybody watching the game, and so most likely there's a greater chance for them to share their faith in that than a traditional church. People may already kind of, nix it. Nah, I don't want to hear anybody from church. But since this person's in sports and I like this person because he's very good at what he does, I'm a little
Hmm.
bit more accepting to hearing what he or she has to say.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a good point. And I think that's yeah, like you said, I think that's very true too, because everybody would just want to hear what people say. This, I think, is more. I think it was a little bit of the statistics saying like these people are rich. You know, they have everything in the world, and they kind of want to hear what they want to say compared to, people that's listening to the pastor. I think it was saying like 40% of those people, or a majority of those people, make less than 40%, and they're a regular churchgoer. So I think that's a pretty interesting, opposite side of that. But I think, like you said, like the sports is just mainstream, and it's very unfiltered, or yeah, it's very unfiltered. I know they try to filter sometimes. I think it was this one instance where somebody was saying Jesus, and they kind of blanked it out. I think ESPN did that one time, and I was like, what the heck? Like, it's crazy. They try to, push it away as much as they can. But the thing is that people are persevering, and still, glorifying God in front of the masses. I think that's pretty great to see. Yeah, I just think it's a new shift, because I think, or I guess the question is, do you think there's like a greater responsibility when it comes to these athletes, when it comes to that light? And do they, they carry so much influence? Do you think that's a big responsibility, and that's why they want to be a greater influence on people?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, when you're an athlete, when you're playing in a professional sport, or even not necessarily professional sport. I mean, the Winter Olympics are coming up in a few weeks, and so you have all these super athletes kind of going out there, and so people just love fighters. People just love winners. People love competition. People love those that excel. So with that, with that being said, I think people kind of lean towards those that stand, stand strong and stand firm. And so with that in mind, I think people want to follow that, right? You know,
Hmm.
they want to follow that athlete that's like a superstar. And so with that, these athletes have a responsibility. Some of them don't want the responsibility. I've heard a few athletes say, "Hey, I'm not your parent. I'm not your mentor.
Yeah,
You know, let me live my life. Let me live my life."
exactly.
And I'm not your mentor, but I think that's probably a selfish. I mean, I can understand where it's coming from, but that is kind of a selfish mindset,
Hmm.
because this is a great opportunity to plant a good seed in those that are following you. And so, yeah, I think it's a great responsibility for athletes to, and I love it when they share the faith, because typically that's not something that's shared that often.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's interesting. And what do you feel about the people, or when mainstream media tries to knock it down? Because like we were saying like earlier with the saying Jesus on air, and ESPN cut it off. And then there's another instance, I think it was an MMA fighter, and he had like or actually there's a few instances I've seen recently where somebody had like a headband, and they told him to take it off.
But yeah, I remember.
And yeah, so they're, you can still see that they're still trying to downplay, I guess, Jesus, and um any type of reference to him. Like, how do you feel about that? Do you think, well, yeah,
It's
how do you feel about
yeah,
that?
I mean, anything that glorifies God. We know there's an enemy, and Satan's the enemy, and so he hates it. He hates when God is glorified,
Yeah,
and so when people, and the people that work behind the scenes, most of them, are not Christians, right?
yeah,
And so they have their own beliefs, and I don't know why, but I do know why. People just get stared, annoyed when they hear when they talk about Jesus, and
yeah,
I'm talking about those who are not saved. And it's a spiritual thing, right? It's a spiritual
definitely.
thing. So, and they have the power to switch cameras, and so that's what you see what happening. So it's not a surprise,
Mhm.
because that's something that Satan doesn't want to hear. And these people are influenced by the enemy. And so they don't want to hear it either. And so they find whatever way possible to not hear it. And so they try to put pressure on the athletes, to stop wearing your headband or stop wearing a shirt. or
Yeah.
talking about Jesus, but the great thing is they're still doing what they're doing. They're still
Yeah.
sharing the faith and sharing, about Jesus. So yeah, it's not surprising to me at all.
Yeah. That's
What you think?
I personally think it's like you said, it's not surprising. I don't know. Like you said, I think God, I mean, the devil despises anything talking about God, especially on the mainstream stage. And that's why we can, kind of parallel this to like the music industry, because we can see that a lot of artists, when they bring up Jesus in the music, they're not going to publish it. You know what I mean? They'll blacklist you, if anything. So we've seen that and heard about those stories as well. But I just think I'm just happy that people are still bringing up when people are still, threatening you with, you know, maybe not with the big check or something like that, or threatening you to with the fine or something like that. I think it's good that people are staying hold and continue, to do what they do and hold in their faith on the mainstream. So that's a great thing to see, that people is really serious about God, and it's not just a facade. It's like, hey, I want to say this because I think it's going to bring me more views, or it
Yeah,
might be a good endorsement. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because I'm portraying this type of image. So I just think it's great that we're seeing it a lot more in nowadays sports. It's a great thing to see, because I think we are watching the Ole Miss game, and then Trinidad Chambliss, and you're like, who's this guy? And then the first thing
Yeah.
he talked about was God a thing too. And the cool thing is that the announcers were talking about his parents' faith and everything like that. So, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Usually you'll think announcers will probably like try to withhold that information, you know what I mean? Like give his whole background and how he was raised in church, and how I think maybe his dad was maybe a pastor or something like that too. So it's cool that the announcers are kind of not trying to shame it or anything as well. So, uh, I don't know. I think this is a good shift, and I think it's like you said, with this new generation. I think we're just being more bold, and with social media, and especially with social media, because I see a lot more influencers of the younger generation trying to push it,
Mhm.
especially on TikTok. Have you seen that anything on TikTok? Like when I scroll, um, I see a lot of people on TikTok having like little Bible studies, and it's usually like teenagers or younger adults, maybe in like their mid-20s, stuff like that. I thought it was pretty cool. They be having like a lot of followers. They be having like a little Bible study. It's pretty interesting.
Well, I'm not a TikToker, so I have, Instagram. I don't even want to mention Facebook.
That should be your number one social
Hey,
media.
hey, hey, watch it, buddy. Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't have TikTok, but I do see like on IG and Facebook,
Mhm.
and then even on YouTube, and a lot of it has to do with your algorithm too, because if you as you select these types of
Yeah,
things, and
definitely.
they're gonna pop up more. But yeah, I do see a lot of multi-generational and multicultural people just sharing their faith, athletes included. And so yeah, it's pretty interesting. I wanted to say too, as far as some of these news organizations as well as the schools, I think a lot of times they tolerate some of these athletes, Christian athletes, and one of the reasons why is because they're bringing in big money. They're bringing in big money, so they're like, man, I don't want to. This I can deal with this because a lot of money's coming in, and so I'll let them slide and say these things because they're bringing a whole lot of attention to my organization. So yeah,
I guess in good publicity or bad publicity in that case.
yeah. I mean,
What do you
I think in good publicity in a lot of ways
okay.
because of this person, regardless of what his or her faith is, if they're really good at what they do,
Yeah, that's true.
then people are gonna flock to that, right? And
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
so if that person's really good at what they do and they're a person of faith, they're gonna tolerate it more because they know that they can't deny how good
Mhm.
this person is, right? So they can't take that away from them, and so they
Yeah. I guess
tolerate what
that
they have to
could
share.
be. Yeah, I guess that could be bad publicity if they try to shut him off enough. Yeah, so it's like, no, this, especially like, I mean, I wish LeBron was like, deep in faith like that, but they'll never, try to dismiss anything he tries to say. Although they have before
Oh,
when
they
it
just
comes to,
dismissed what he said.
yeah, they have before actually. But what was that about? That was, what was he saying?
He
I think it
started
was like
talking he started
politics or
talking
something.
yeah, he started talking politics, and so people will
Yeah,
start jumping on, "Well, you stay in your lane. You play
yeah,
just focus on
exactly.
playing basketball." It's like, really?
Interesting.
I'm not just a basketball player. There's more to me
Exactly.
than just basketball. But anyway, that's another topic.
Facts. But yeah, I mean, in the same consensus, it still kind of makes sense. But I saw this another statistic is saying, kind of going to what you were talking about, where 61% of Americans support athletes' public professions of faith. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's pretty high.
Yeah.
That's very high, considering in the time that in which we live,
Hmm.
when people are just not as religious, especially in the U.S.
Yeah,
Well,
man.
in Europe too. I mean, people are not as religious as they used to be, and so for that percentage to be that high, I'm actually surprised.
Yeah. But all right, so that's another thing. Do you think, like where you're saying that you don't think a lot of people were religious, do you think it's growing? I think one time in church they were saying like obviously, the new generations are starting to come to, Jesus and faith at I wouldn't say alarming rate, but a fast rate compared to other generations. Why do you think people are more not trying to hide their faith anymore if that's the case? Do you think it's like a revival when it comes to like God? Is it like in like towards like the last days that more people are gonna know about Jesus? And do you think that plays a part in that?
Yeah, I think it's several factors that are involved. I mentioned it earlier that my generation. So there were periods of revival. I think in modern Christian history, and
Mhm,
then the Azusa revival. I think it was in the West Coast, San Francisco, I believe. That was kind of a revival, and so a lot of people came to Christ, and that was a big movement. And then fast forward, Billy Graham era time period. There was a big revival with Billy Graham. So I think
mhm.
it's cyclical, but I think I think the church in the last 50 years, it got a little lax.
Okay.
It got caught up in tradition, got focused on the actions of faith, but not really
Mhm.
the heart of faith. And so I think a lot of young people were kind of like, y'all a bunch of hypocrites because
Yeah.
y'all talk about it, but you're not really walking it. We
Mhm.
want more than what y'all talking about. And a lot of these churches, unfortunately, have not been able to change. And so you had a big influx of younger people not going to church because the church was not feeding them or, not feeding them the truth, or at least if they were feeding the truth, they were not acting.
Okay.
They was teaching it, but not, actually acting it. And I think with your generation, your generation is a generation of action.
Mhm.
You know, y'all don't really care about talk. Y'all care more about action. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a revival now because a lot of the younger people are realizing that true Christianity is an action, a religion of faith and
Mhm.
action. And if you go back and read the Bible, you see Jesus and his disciples, man, they were moving constantly.
Mhm.
They were activists, right? And they moved throughout that whole region and made change. And so as people really get to know us, "Oh, okay, Jesus was not this guy sitting in the corner going, yeah, I mean, he was
Yeah.
out there touching people, healing people, rebuking people, turning tables over in the temple.
Yeah.
Oh, he was radical. I mean, he was radical. He would not have been considered a conservative in his day. They would have probably
Definitely.
called him Antifa. Yeah, I mean, seriously, because he did not fit the norm. The church was really not the church of the day. It was the synagogue. It was the Pharisees, and they were like the elite of people, but they had these rules that
Yeah.
people were like, it's got to be more to it than just this. These laws that you have to abide by. I mean, you can abide by laws and not have any heart in it. I mean, we follow laws, but we may not necessarily believe in those laws, but we follow laws because they're the law. But I mean, if, when Jesus came around, he gave the reason why the laws were in place. And people were like, okay, now I understand why that law is in place. And so I think fast forward today, people are seeing why the Bible exists and why those things happened in the Bible. And those are things that were action. Those were things that were against the norm. And I think a lot of young people kind of lean towards that because they're like, we don't want to be the norm. We want to do something different. We want to do things that'll make a difference in our communities and the lives of others. And so I think that's kind of where we're seeing this kind of resurgence, this kind of of young people coming to Christ because of that.
Okay, that's interesting. And I guess to put the I guess the cherry on top of that. And I think that's going back to what we were saying earlier, that God using these athletes as the modern day influence of the gospel, because it is a lot of views and mainstream on that compared to other years, I think is definitely shifting in that case. And that's pretty interesting, like you're saying, that I think people nowadays, especially when this generation is seeking more of purpose, because it feels like you said, maybe the past 50 years, maybe when the church was being complacent, that it was just a cycle. You know what I mean? Like my grandmother goes to church, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm forced to go there in a sense where it's not really you're understanding the reasoning why the church is there. You're not understanding why the Bible was written. And most of the stuff, as you know, as we read in the Bible, is happening today. And it's kind of like a cycle. Like it always, everything that we go through has already happened. And we had to look at the Bible as like a reference guide to how to navigate through those lifestyles and cycles that we see now today. But I think it's just pretty interesting just how God is just taking athletes and the mainstream media to glorify him and get more people to come to him. So I think it's pretty cool just to see that shift and live through it. But like you said, it might have been, you know, different cycles of revivals and things like that. But just for my generation, I think this is just interesting just to see firsthand, because I feel like a lot of us has been lost in the past few years, and now a lot of people is starting to seek God and see the real meaning behind it, and not just like the the human flaws of church and the human flaws of Christianity. Because you know every religion has the people that makes it tarnish it at the end of the day. But I think a lot of people are seeing the truth on like, oh, Jesus is real, and then science on top of that is helping out, because you know it's like, oh, we know where uh, the ark is. You know, we're in the mountains. Like we have the artifacts of that. Also, like we know where Jesus died. Like here's literally where he is. This is where Jesus is coming back, and the tree of olives and stuff like that. So Mountain of Olives. So it's like it's pretty interesting that you can. I think more of the science explanation of stuff is starting to come and be more pronounced with it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people want, is kind of like I know, you know, God is already, already here and showing his face, but I think more people seeing the face when they see the science, I guess, behind it. It kind of proves it. Although, you know, God has already proven himself, but, you know, people always just want to see more proof, I guess. This
Yeah.
human flaw, I guess, that we all
Yeah.
have.
And that is why it's so important, for us Christians that have skills in athletics, or skills in the marketplace, or skills, in the community, or, scientists and engineers. When we have those skills, it's so vital for us to share our faith, because we are surrounded by people that may not know God, and God has blessed us with these skills to be able to share them. And
Hmm.
I think that's a great thing. And I think, with athletes, I think that's awesome, because they're using that platform where a lot of people, appreciate their skill set. They appreciate their fight, and are attracted to that. And
Hmm.
so they're, like I said before, they're more open to hearing what they have to say. And I think that same thing with us, in our workplace,
Yeah,
when we work well, and we set good examples, and we have integrity, and we go the extra mile, people are attracted to that, and then they
yeah,
wanna know, and they wanna get to know you, and then that's a great opportunity to be able to share your faith, and they're more prone to listen to you because of the things that you've done well. So they're
definitely.
not gonna say, "Oh, you're a flaky dude," They still may call you flaky, but they cannot
Yeah,
deny your skill set. They cannot deny how God has blessed you with these skills to be able to make a difference. They cannot deny that. And so most likely they're going to be a little bit more open to hearing what you have to say, or even debating, right? So it's pretty cool. I love what this topic we talked about today, because I think it's awesome to hear people share their faith about Jesus.
definitely. And I guess to wrap everything up, I do want to share one more scripture, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. So wherever you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it off for the glory of God. And I think that's basically like a recap of what you're just saying. Even this in the workplace, obviously, with athletes and working on the field or the court or whatever they're doing, but also just for us, wherever we're doing, do all for the glory of God, because like you said, people can look at us different. We can work different. We have more meaning to why we're doing things. So if you just put God first in everything you do, you can get those things that your goals and what those milestones that you're trying to reach, because it's a higher purpose of above everything that you're doing. So I just wanted to add that, just because I think that's what it all boils down to, is just people, when they put all their glory in God and do it all for him, great things come out of it, and you really get to see the fruits of your labor. So yeah, so I think that's the end of the conversation, really.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I say, yo, Christian brothers and sisters who are watching this, don't be a slacker.
Frats.
Don't be slacking, because you ain't representing when you slacking, and people are going to use that against you. I know that person.
Yeah.
They say they're Christian, they go to church, but then they don't do their work. They be coming in late, and they be trying to skip work for whatever reason.
I don't want to be that guy, but isn't it
Don't
like a
do that.
sin to be lazy?
Yeah, it is.
So
If you don't work, you don't eat. That's what the Bible
yeah.
says. Yeah, so,
So
if
keep
you
that in
call
account.
yourself a Christian and you slacking, you need to get it right, because
Exactly.
that's not what God has called us to be.
Exactly.
And that's not a good example for those who are watching, because those who are watching will use that against you, and
Yeah.
they will classify all Christians in that category.
Exactly. That's what the adversaries always do. Just want to classify everybody in that one bad category. One bad apple ruins every other bunch.
Yep. So true.
So so just like secondhand that just do everything in the glory of God, and you can do anything. And you could be, if you are like a teenager and you want to be an athlete, do the same thing, because if you put that faith in him, you could go to the NFL and really believe in it. You can definitely do it. So
Yeah. And even if
yeah,
you
just
don't
want to.
make even if you don't make the NFL, you still can be a person of influence in
Yeah, definitely.
whatever place God, you know, gives you,
Hmm.
because not
Yeah.
everybody's gonna make it to the NFL, or not
Yeah,
everybody's gonna
definitely.
make it to professional sports. Only a small percentage.
Yeah, it's
But
very small.
but do your best. You do your best. Period. Right.
Exactly.
And that
And
even comes to
nothing.
sweeping floors.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that you do, definitely do your best.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to give kudos to athletes, because that's,
Yeah.
like you said, it's a lot to get to where, get high up in the leagues of there. So
Yeah, yeah. I was watching the figure skating. I think they're presenting all the they're presenting all the figure skaters for the Olympics, and yeah, it must have been 12 of them. I can't remember the final count, but one of the guys was saying that, hey, y'all see us on the ice like this is nothing, but y'all don't know the pain, the suffering, the anguish,
yeah,
the hurt, and the challenges that have gone behind the scenes, and not just, like overnight. This stuff has been going on for years. Some of these athletes have been training since childhood. So people typically don't see, the work that is going on behind the scenes for them to be in the position they are today.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, 100% is the work, because I'm pretty sure like a majority of people that's in the major leagues of baseball, football, basketball, whatever, they've been training since they were kids, like their parents were like waking them up, going to practice. You got a trainer, like you're doing things, you're not playing with your friends, you're not outside with your friends, you're training. Well, that's real life in general. If you really want to get somewhere, you got to train when you don't want to.
yep, that is so true.
That's really what it boils down to. I guess that's everything. Like, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Man, like we always say, if you have any other topics or if you have any feedback, just let us know in the comments and we'll get to you. And like I said, I hope you enjoyed everything, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care, guys. We'll see you.
Have a good one.